Hey everybody, it's Rod with the Photo Fair coming back at you with another video. Today, we're going to talk about the Canon 17 millimeter tilt and shift lens. I mean, look at this thing. Look at that big old bulbous. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that element. That's crazy. So yeah, let's get right into the video. So yeah, I'm going to actually do some through the lens video showing you how the movements on the tilt and the shift work and how to be effective using a lens like this. Okay, I'm going to go over the basic controls on this lens. Again, this is the Canon tilt and shift 17 millimeter. They call it the TSE 17 millimeter L. I'm going to keep the cap on just for a safety. The lens has two basic control areas. You've got the shift, which is right down here, and you've got a little sort of ruler line here, giving you an idea of how much shift you have done, and that I believe that is millimeters. Each one of those marks is a millimeter, and then you have the tilt function. The tilt function is here. So a shift is the most common. And you'll find a lot of aftermarket lenses that only do shift. And frankly, Nikon, way back in the 60s, had a lens that just did shift. They called it the PC, Perspective Control Nikkor. They were the first company to offer a shift lens. And then Canon, of course, Nikon and Canon battling it for years and years. Canon had to be the first to do a tilt and a shift all in the same lens. So this, of course, does both. So there's a couple of locking buttons here. This is a lock button. It locks the tilt so that it won't just slip and slide on you. You just loosen that, and now this becomes free. And then this control knob on the other side here, you can see is moving. Hopefully you can see that. That's how much range of tilt that you get. Okay. This lens, to me, when it came out, it was an engineering marvel. 17 millimeters. You might think, oh, Rod, 17, that's not that big a deal. But the reality is, it kind of is, because by having that range of movements, this is a 17 millimeter lens that has enough coverage for almost covering a medium format. You could just about cover a 645 piece of film or digital sensor with this lens. That's pretty impressive to have a 17 that can have that big of an image circle to give you all of this movement. It's roughly, I think, 12 or 13 millimeters of movement in each direction on the shift. So think about that. A full frame sensor is 24 by 36, but this has the ability to give you an additional 12 millimeters on all those dimensions. So it really makes it basically a medium format coverage lens. To me, that's just mind-boggling. And that's why you have that crazy bulbous lens element. But anyway, so that, and then the shift, you have the same thing on the shift. Let me get it, turn around here. So this is just a locking mechanism. So it'll lock it in place so it doesn't slip on your move once you have it set. But of course, you have to turn that little knob there. And then on the other side is the actual movement. And you can see it moving up and down there, sort of shifting in either direction. Now, what's cool about the lens is it also allows you to rotate both the tilt axis and the shift axis. And that's what these little buttons here are for. This little guy right here allows this to rotate. And there it is. See, I'm rotating. It's got click stops at like 45-degree increments. So that way, if I want to do I can do either a shift left to right or a rise and fall just by rotating it appropriately. And I can do it whether it's on whether I'm doing a landscape shot or a portrait orientation. So it gives you the ability to do that on whichever axis you want. And the same goes for the tilt. It's got a little button right here. And when I release that, it lets me rotate the tilt function independent of the shift. So I could do a tilt on the vertical axis, but do a shift on the horizontal axis. On a view camera, rise and fall are basically just using the shift function up and down, whereas a shift on a view camera is left and right. And on a view camera, because you have two standards and you have movements on both standards, you have the ability to do both at the same time. That's the one real limitation to these full frame camera lenses, is that you can only do, if you're going to do a rise, you can't also do a shift at the same time. Okay, that's really kind of your only real limitation here. So that's kind of the controls there. In this video, I am going to show you just through the lens what's happening. I'll narrate what I'm doing, and then you can see how it's affecting the image. So that'll kind of show you some of the limitations of the lens, but it'll also show you how the lens works and why it's such a clever tool for people that want to do some basic view camera movements without having to haul out the view camera. Hey, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, would you? It really helps the channel out, helps us put out more content and get it out to more people. Okay, before we go downtown, the most common use for these lenses is to emulate a rise movement on a view camera. This is where you're trying to take a picture of something tall and you can't back up. And so in order to get the whole image, you have to tilt the camera up, and then you get these converging lines, this kind of leaning backward look. The rise is designed to correct that. Now, this is only, a picture of my house. It's about 30 feet tall at the top of that high roof there, so that's not really a big deal. But if I try to make the line straight, I end up with a picture like this. I'm chopping the top off. And so what we're going to do with that rise movement, again, it's a shift. It's just a vertical shift. You can see now I can get the whole thing in, and I don't have the converging lines. That's the basic and most common function of these lenses. Okay, here I'm going to use the shift, doing effectively a rise movement to try and get the top of that building in the photo, and it is capable of doing it, has enough coverage. And then I'm going to start fiddling around with the tilt, and these are basically swing movements on a view camera. Now you can see the focus changing. Notice the building way off in the background, that blue one on the bottom right. It's fuzzy. Now it's sharp because I'm changing the plane of focus. That's kind of what the tilt and the swing movements on a view camera do, allow you to change the plane of focus. Okay, now I'm going to do a fall movement instead of a rise. I want to get less sky and more of the foreground. I can do that by simply shifting downward. Okay, on this one, I'm obviously shooting landscape, and I'm trying to get that cable suspended tower there in the image, and I can't quite do it without cutting off the bottom of that fence line there. And I'm backed up as far as I can go, unless I want to go in the water, which I don't want to dive into the water. But it shows you the shift. So the shift function is perspective control. It optically simulates moving the camera. When we're trying to get a tall structure in the frame and we do a rise, we're lifting the camera optically up as if we had gone up 6 flights of stairs or gotten up on a 15-foot ladder. We can do this left to right as well. If we're trying to take a picture of a room and we want a certain perspective, but there's obstacles in our way keeping us from doing that, we can use that left or right shift function to do effectively the same thing. Okay, on this A-B scenario here, looking at the living room, I have the camera parallel and perpendicular to the lines of the room. The fireplace is kind of off slightly to the left, and I have more of the sofa and window adornments there on the right. What if I wanted it to have a more centered approach? Well, I can just tilt the camera, kind of swing the camera, and now the fireplace is in the middle. I have less of the windows, and I have both sofas in the photo, but my lines are no longer parallel and perpendicular. So with a shift lens, I can fix that. So now B and C. C is where I simply used a shift to the left. Now the fireplace is centered. I still don't have exactly the same as tilting the camera, but I don't have that dining room hutch in the picture. And I was effectively able to crop out the portion of the window I didn't want. And it fireplace remains with parallel and perpendicular lines. Now, sometimes in real estate, you want to show less ceiling and more foreground.
You can always squat down, get down low, but then you have that, 2-year-old kid's perspective. With the shift function, I can do effectively a fall maneuver, and I can lower that camera, but without changing the height of the camera. So now I've got a lot of foreground here. I've got less ceiling, but I don't look like the shot was taken by a 2-year-old, 2 foot tall. So that's another function you can do with the shift. This next example is more suited to a longer lens than this 17, maybe the Canon 45 or the 90 from either Nikon or Canon, where depth of field is an issue. So these 4 whiskey bottles are lined up and they're spaced. The Elijah Craig bottle on the right is extremely close to the lens, just maybe 8 or 10 inches away. And then that Woodinville bottle way in the back is, a couple feet away. So I can't get them all in focus. Now, this is a 17, so I absolutely could by just stopping it down a little. But what if I were using a longer lens and I wanted a blurry background? Using the tilt feature of this lens on the horizontal axis, I effectively can do what's called a swing movement. And I can get all of them in focus, wide open, by doing this swing maneuver. Take a look at this. Now you can see they're all in focus. If I were using a longer lens, the background would still be out of focus. That window would be soft, and I would never have been able to get all of them in focus with, say, a 90mm lens, just because there's not enough depth of field. But here, I've altered the plane of focus so that it's now at a diagonal that mimics the diagonal placement of the bottles. You'll see that all the bottles are now in focus. Using the swing maneuver I just did here, I could have done this with a much longer lens, a 45 or even a 90mm lens. This last example with the whiskey bottle shows all of them lined up on the same plane. So here, they're all in focus. What if I wanted to isolate just the center bottle and make the other ones appear to be fuzzy, but I didn't want to place them at different distances from the camera? Well, that swing move works here too. Now you can see that moving away from the center in either direction produces increasingly fuzzier results. Now, again, this is a 17. It has a lot of depth of field. Had I have done this with the longer 45 or 90, the effect would have been even more dramatic.
So there you have it, the Canon tilt and shift 17mm lens. And I mentioned, in the other commentary, there are a bunch of other lenses. Canon had a 24, a 45, a 50, a 90. They actually had 2 90s, and then they had a 135. They had some L. Some of them were L lenses like this. Some of them were just consumer grade. Nikon's got several, and there's some aftermarket items as well. You can often find lenses like this at Photo Fair. We just had a Photo Fair back in March. And the next photo fair is scheduled for Seawood Photo in June. And then we got the biggest show of the year in Portland. And you can check photofair.com for more information on all of our shows up and through this year. And we'll be posting next year's schedule as well. So 2025, the 50th anniversary year of the photo fair. So we're kind of excited to be a part of that. Anyway, we'll see you next time right here on YouTube or at camera shows up and down the West Coast.